Morning, Torah lovers. Shavua Tov. This is the final live stream that I will be doing of learning Mishnayot in memory of Lea Andersen, who passed and whose Shloshim ends tomorrow. And the group of us, if we all do the things that we signed up for, will have studied the entire Mishnah in her honor, which is really a huge merit. It's great. And in so many ways, I feel like it should only be the beginning of the impact that Leah's memory has and continues to have in the world and with those of us who bear it even a little bit, like me. Okay. So I have already learned all of the Mishnayot in the first two Prakim, in the first two chapters of Mishna D'mai, and if you want to go review those, they're all on the playlist. And yeah, please check those out. And today I'm just gonna take a look at all of them, kind of zoomed out, and try to see if I can detect anything about the structure of the way these Mishnayot were put together, and if that can tell us anything about the meaning behind it. Now, normally, if I were going to do this, I would look at the whole Masechet, which is seven Prakim. So there's only going to be like so much I'm really going to be able to learn from only looking at two, but let's see. Okay. So here's everything. Here's everything we've done. The 4 Mishnayot in Perek Aleph and the 5 Mishnayot in Perek Bet. And I don't think anyone can actually read it. I can't read this at this text level, but just to give you a sense of this is everything we've learned. Kind of cool to see all of it right here. I went through this and I did a little tiny bit of markup. You can see I highlighted some words. All these words I highlighted are the word patur, exempt. And I also bolded a few things, like I bolded this, I bolded this. These are things I kind of thought were like titles. So I guess I should maybe start by just reviewing what is D'mai and what is the whole D'mai system. Did I write that down anywhere? Yeah, I did. Okay. D'mai is this category of D'mai is a special stringency that's based on an assumption that comes from real observance of what people were like, meaning observations of what people were actually doing in a certain point in history. So there's a system of taxation in the Torah, which is 2% goes to the Kohanim. 2% of agricultural produce grown in the land of Israel. 2% of agricultural produce that grows in the land of Israel is given to the Kohanim. That's called Truma Gedola. If you don't do Truma Gedola, you are chayav mita. If you don't give this 2% to the Kohanim, you are liable for the death penalty. And then after you do that, there's Maaser Rishon, which is 10% of the Levim. There's Maaser Sheni, which is 10% or so you set aside for yourself for the 3 festivals that happen throughout the year. And in every 3rd and 6th year of the 7-year Shemitah cycle, instead of Maaser Sheni, you would give Maaser Oni, which is 10% for the poor, and so similar. People who don't have access to food, or to land to grow their own food. So all in all, it doesn't come out exactly to 22% because you take the 2% and then it's 10% of what's left over, and then it's 10% of what's left over from that. But don't worry, it's about 22%. It's like 21%. So all in all, this is about 22% of everything that you grow. Everything that is grown in the land of Israel, 22% is taxed for the central temple system to continue, for the Levim, who are not only in Jerusalem in the temple, but dispersed throughout the land in 48 cities, and who don't have farmland generally, or they have the farmland around the city, but they have farmland around their cities, but they're not, generally speaking, farmers. So they get 10%, and they also fulfill other roles, like they maintain the refuge cities for people who kill by accident, in addition to other things. And there's 10% for yourself for festivals, so enabling us to kind of maintain communal celebrations, but also every third year, giving all this food, instead of to yourself, you give it to the poor and those who otherwise don't have access to food for themselves. So that's what our tax groceries are being used for in the Torah system. And all of this, again, only applies to, as far as I think I'm saying this right, all of this only applies to agricultural produce grown in Eretz Yisrael. Also, a lot of this only applies when the temple is standing. So, what's D'mai? D'mai is a stringency because most people were called Haaretz, people of the land. Most people only took Truma Gedola. Most people only took Truma Gedola. Whoa, why did that happen? Most people only took Truma Gedola. The significance of this is if you are holding by rabbinic levels of observance, you're not allowed to eat produce that hasn't been fully tithed. I'm going to say we, because that's the frame of reference of the Mishnah, but we is almost like a very small percentage of a minority of the population is we in this sentence, but we're not allowed to eat tavel. It's called tavel. Sorry for the inconsistent. Tavel, not fully tithed produce. We're not allowed to eat tavel. So I shouldn't say most people only took truma. I should say most people were only strict about Truma Gedola. It was doubtful whether people did these other tithes, or at least doubtful whether people did this one. But if you don't do even one of them, you're not allowed. We are not allowed to eat it. So, but it's doubtful whether they've done it or not. Maybe they did it, and maybe they didn't. We don't know. And in general, the stringency of D'mai is when we get food from an Am Haaretz, we take these tithes out of it ourselves. So either if they didn't do it, then we're doing it for them the first time, and we're making sure that it's definitely not tavel. Or if they did do it, then we're just taking out a little extra that's like, it's not, then if they did it, then that food is not actually like maaser sheni food, because that's already been done. But we're just covering our bases. Because we want to really make sure that we're not eating tevel. That's important. So that's D'mai. I hope everything that I just said is accurate. If anything I said is not accurate, please let me know in the comments or in the live chat if you know. So that's D'mai in 5 minutes. Now you might expect Masechet D'mai to open up with a description of what I just explained of here's what D'mai is. But the Mishnah almost never works like that. The Mishnah is kind of assuming that you already know what all the terms mean. The Mishnah is kind of assuming you already know what the terms mean, and that's not really what they're here. They're not here to explain life to. That's not what it's about. So the first Mishnah is, if you recall, everything that we're lenient, the kinds of produce that we're lenient about the need to take this extra D'mai tithe from. And then there are different kinds of things that are fully exempt from D'mai, from the stringency of D'mai. And then here, D'mai in lo chomesh, various ways that D'mai produce is not treated as full maaser sheni produce, as full maaser sheni food. So again, ways that we are ways in which D'mai we're treating that food as more lenient, and we're assuming all of these things kind of assume that we didn't really need to take D'mai produce at all. The third Mishnah is halokeach lezera, if you buy produce from an am haaretz for any purpose that's basically purposes other than human consumption, all of that is exempt from the stringency of D'mai, and also depending on where you get it from, it's exempt from D'mai, and times when you know circumstantially that it has been tithed, it's exempt from D'mai. Oh, I missed a patur. And then the fourth Mishnah in this is Hadmai Ma'arvin Bo, various ways that we treat that we can use D'mai as legitimate food, meaning it's been tithed, Samara it's tithed it. And the word patur appears in this parak 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. 8 times, and then it doesn't appear at all in parak bets until the very end. And then I glanced through all the other ones. It's that's interesting. What if they all ended in the word patur? These are the only 2 times that a parak ends in the word patur. So there's a really strong line throughout the whole first parak of exemptions and leniencies with D'mai, which is all to say these are the ways we behave. These are the ways we behave as if the Amei Haaretz who we bought this food from actually did fulfill their responsibilities from our perspective, actually did take all the maasrot from the food. And then in Parak Bet, so if I were to give this parak a title, it might be something I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Trusting trusting. I don't know. Leniencies, and exemptions. And again, being lenient or exempting something from a stringency is to say that that stringency doesn't need to happen because other people were already being strict about the basic requirement from our perspective. Okay, so then the second Mishnah is like Elu Dvarim Mitasurin D'mai. These are times that you always take this stringent D'mai tithe from certain kinds of produce. Oh, it starts with the word patur also. That's interesting. And then this is what you have to do to be trusted so that we don't have to, so that this is what an Amaretz has to do to become trusted, meaning that we trust that they took tithes from them and we don't have to treat their produce as D'mai. And then we get this is everything you have to take on yourself to be considered a chaver, someone who we trust kind of in general to be holding to a high level of observance when it comes to the laws of ritual purity. Included in that is this thing that I mentioned at the very beginning, if we're concerned about this at all, because we're not allowed to eat tevel. No, that's not about that. But there is this idea that even with tithed produce, which is called chulin, produce that's been tithed but isn't like sanctified for any of these things. There's an idea that if you're a chaver, you're going to eat even like all of these have to be eaten in a state of tahara, in a state of purity. If you're a chaver, you're even going to eat chulin from Eretz Yisrael in a state of purity. So in that sense, being a chaver is related. Being a chaver is really about being very strict about laws of ritual purity. And in the sense that a chaver is strict even about eating chulin in a state of ritual purity, that is related to the whole conversation of D'mai. And then we get kind of inside the category of like chaverim, different merchants and like middlemen between the farmers and the eaters. Not that farmers and eaters are mutually exclusive categories, but between the farmers and the eaters, we get like middlemen who are like merchants and bakers and those kinds of people. Various like ways that they they treat D'mai produce a little bit differently because again, D'mai is already a stringency. And it's quite expensive. It's quite expensive of a stringency. It's 20 or at least 10% cost to you. On top, potentially on top of the 22% that's already been taken out of the produce. So it's really a high cost observance. And there's like, well, bakers don't really have to do this so strictly. Small scale like grocers and retailers are not allowed to sell D'mai produce at all. So that's like and like anyone who's like a wholesaler is allowed to sell D'mai. And then there's like, well, who's that? People like wholesalers and people who deal in large quantities of produce. And then the fifth Mishnah kind of zooms in on this concept of midah gasa, of like wholesaling, of selling in bulk quantities. And there's like, how do we measure that? How do we measure that and like under what circumstances and what kinds of food are like exempt from D'mai because of like the way that they get sold in bulk without measuring specifically. So if I were to like nest these, I would like say, well, there's Elu Dvarim. Well, that's not gonna work. I would say there's like Elu Dvarim, Mitasrin D'mai, and then there's like on the couple. It's interesting. Like this is one we're strict about D'mai all the time, and then here's a kind of person who is strict about D'mai all the time. Here's a kind of person who's strict not only about D'mai, but about like all sorts of other things all the time. And then I would say like this Mishnah is kind of a comment on the previous Mishnah of like, okay, you're a chaver, but inside of the category of chaver, we have some exceptions or some things at least that need to be clarified. And then I would say this Mishnah seems to be a comment on the previous Mishnah. So it's a Mishnah commenting on a Mishnah that's commenting on a Mishnah, about like just zooming in on the midah gasa aspect of the previous Mishnah. So if I were to give Perek Bet a title, what I feel like I just said it in a way that was satisfying to me. These are food we're strict with about D'mai. Here's someone who's strict about D'mai. So we could say stringency. So that's kind of nice. It's balanced. If I'm right even about what I'm saying, which I'm not fully convinced that I am, because this kind of structural thinking is very hard to do. And I had a teacher who would always say, you need 10 proofs to be able to say the kinds of things that I'm saying, like give stuff titles and say, like, this is how this is linked and this is how that's linked. So I'm not convinced that I've brought 10 proofs. But provisionally, it seems like the first parak is about leniencies and exemptions. Second parak is about stringencies. And to really be able to do this exercise fully, I would really be curious to look at the other 5 chapters of D'mai and see how those are structured also. Because I don't feel like I can say anything really like big yet about what the organization of this Masechet is trying to teach us about how D'mai works, except that we start with leniencies and then follow up with stringencies, and that makes a certain amount of sense considering that D'mai is already itself a stringency. Okay, so with that, I'm sure there's more I could say, but with that, I think I'm going to conclude my learning of the first 2 Prakim of Mishna D'mai. If this is something that is cool that you've enjoyed watching, please let me know, like the videos. And if you want me to continue to do stuff like this, either with D'mai or with something else, I've been having a lot of fun. And if people are interested, I would love to continue to like live stream some learning. It's been really good for me. So if you want me to keep doing this, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I won't keep doing it. Beyond what I've been doing in memory of Lea. And speaking of Lea, I don't know. There's just her death has left a huge emptiness in our community, and there's not so many trans women who are Jewish and holding as high levels of observance and Jewish commitment as Lea was, and she was studying to become a rabbi, and it's a huge loss. Even though I didn't personally know her very well, I don't know how we're going to make up for this. But I do think it means that we all have to do a little bit more. And I certainly feel like I have to do a little bit more to be holding the fire that she was bringing into the world, even just in a small part. So hopefully, I hope that the learning that I've done for the past couple of weeks is a part of uplift Lea's soul, and I hope that it's only the beginning, and that everything all of us have been doing collectively for this Mishna Siyum project is only the beginning of the extra stringencies that we're going to take on for ourselves to continue to hold her memory and to help our community of trans Jews and trans Jewish femmes who are really excited to be learning text and keeping practices. Help keep that community as alive or more alive than it would have been if she were still with us, if such a thing is possible. And if this learning has been meaningful to you in any way, I really hope that it inspires you and that you let it inspire you to take on your own learning and to do a little bit more than you might have otherwise, and to engage, if not in the Mishnah, then at least in some kind of text. And I hope that when you do that, you keep Lea Yocheved Andersen in mind. And send a little bit of the energy that the text is giving you up to her when you're learning. Sophie says, I love the idea that inferring the structure of a text requires rigor and proof. Yeah, I like it too. I try to be careful not to ever say more than I think I have the right to be saying, which is really hard when you're running a YouTube channel and doing social media. It's really hard to stay in your limits. Okay, so with that, I will conclude the series of live streams of the first two Prakim of Mishna D'mai. Sophie, thank you for this kavana. What a way to clarify the blessing that her memory will be. Yeah. Okay, all of this learning has been in memory and for the uplift of the soul of Lea Yocheved, of Avraham Basara. May the gates of Gan Eden open to receive her soul. And in general, the learning on Tifer Torah is sponsored in memory of these other beloved neshamas via Patreon. Okay, so with that, I will see you all for the next live stream I do, whatever that may be, or for the next video that gets posted. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good week or whatever amount of time you have left before Shabbos when you are watching this video. Yeah, keep loving the Torah.